movement without the baggage of, I wouldn't say dogmas, but basically cultural Christians, where so much of rituals are embedded. So then of course, unfortunately, would take away the real relevance and the significance and the efficacy and the impact of the practice. So the reason why I think the people who, I mean, if you look at the general trend in the world, who do this kind of practice, they really don't know much about the background of Buddha's teaching. In fact, they might think they might not be associated with Buddhism. If you ask Vipassana meditators, are you Buddhist? They might not say they are Buddhists. Yeah. They know that there are spiritual, practitioners, and I don't know if even if they use this word spiritual, because spiritual seems to be, again, it has its own problem. But yes, I think it's the modern movement of Vipassana actually, from my own perspective, gave a very, from my own view, also as a philosopher trained in the rigorous training of the Tibetan Tibetan dialectical philosophical system. I think that's probably one of the most rigorous, and probably the most rigorous, at least, tradition that we know of. And this is kind of widespread, especially the Nalanda tradition that Tibetans champions and specializes. But nevertheless, one component is missing, is this real implementation of the practical aspect. So if we are really down to understanding Buddha's teaching in deeply philosophical level, but if you really miss the real application, how would you actually apply that into day-to-day life without leaving aside all the rites and rituals and basically going straight? That's what Buddha did. Buddha was sitting on a tree. He doesn't have the bells. He doesn't have the gong. He doesn't have any of those gears. He just have probably his begging bowl. That's all he has. No, religious objects or anything. And that's what he trained. And if you look at in the sort of course, we are getting a very different commentarial tradition from Mayan aspect. That's the Sutra that actually exists. That's why actually, in a sense, it's very interesting, because it takes Buddha's teaching on a very different level, sort of very idealistic, transcendent, Tyndall, almost like transcendent level. But generally, I think if we consider Buddha as an ordinary man who became extraordinary because of his effort, then efforts mostly driven to developing the faculties and that he had as an ordinary person, mostly paying the attention, using attention, concentration. These are the skills. Then I think we can quite clearly and very nowadays, in fact, quite confidently say that Buddha's teaching is very much alive. Very much alive, and it does not need to be couched into some traditional beliefs, rituals, but basically Buddha's teaching can be trained in a very secular level without any cultural, because after all, it's the development of those skills: attention, concentration, mindfulness, receptivity, sensitivity. Especially, of course, understanding one's own mind and the psychological aspect, how they play, how mind affects the body, how the body affects the mind. And these doesn't seem to have anything to do with the religious belief. In fact, they have nothing to do with the beliefs. Because if you believe, then you would accept seeking, because that's the point. When you believe, that is a stoppage. You basically come to some sort of a destination, and you would stop your inquiry. But Buddha's teaching is all about inquiry. Just keep looking using your body and mind. Keep looking, keep observing. It is the observation, observing consistently, that becomes a knowledge making. So in a sense, it's, in fact, I would say sometimes even exceed the so-called scientific rigorous investigation. Because sometimes scientists think that, well, once they found something, they might stop it. But here, process never stops. Your job is constantly looking. It is in this process of observation, knowledge occurs, awakening occurs. So it's very different from even in the in the West. Even, for example, if you look at the Western philosophers and how define knowledge, they would say true belief. True belief is the criteria of knowledge. But here, Buddha was not asking us to believe. Buddha was asking us to observe, look, and see, right? See for yourself. So, in that sense, yeah, I find very fortunate to be actually on this island. In the beginning, a little bit lost, but as the more I actually spend time, I think it's a beautiful island, and very, I mean, you could say Tama Island, beautiful land, and Buddhist teachings are very much accessible. In the end, Buddhist accessibility to Buddhist teaching is not going outward to look for scriptures and the words of Buddha. Initially, you might need them as a guide because just like a guide. But then you are the book that Buddha wants us to read. Your whole, this body, mind, body, that's the book. That's the textbook. And if you start reading it cover to cover, deeper level, you, of course, initially, you get only the surface level understanding, and then that can inspire people. Very important. But if you go deeper level, the only way you can go is using your attention, intention, going deeply, and the concentration. Because without concentration, you're left on the surface level and then get stuck. So therefore, samadhi and vipassana always needs to go together, because samadhi gives the edge, concentration, and vipassana gives you this the penetrating power. Because after all, you have to literally dissect, dissect and decompose whole the cycle, the solidity in order to discover what Buddha's teaching is all about. So then, yeah, I think in a sense, when you follow Buddha, you are literally taking your own path deeper within as an inward journey. So sorry for taking too long. Okay, I think should be stopped and sit for a little while and then visiting.
That is so appreciated, because I just want to sort of comment. It's almost like the teachings only ever eventuated because of that foundational practice, isn't it? So it's sort of like it's so inseparable.
Absolutely. And now I think if remember, remember His Holiness always emphasized about this, what we call secular Buddhism, right? And teaching Buddhist ethics, ethics as a secular ethics. But generally, if you look at the most interesting, the scientific aspect of Buddhist teaching now lies not in the theory, but actually the way in which one is to pursue it. So then you little drowsy, you're not following Buddha's path. If you're distracted, you're not following Buddha's path. If you're believing something dogmatically, you are not following Buddha's path. If you're observing, doesn't matter whatever arises in the mind, observing, and not taking anything for granted or not believing. And that's what they call in seeing lies the Buddha's path, or in observing lies Buddha's path. So it's all about knowing, and it is not sort of accumulation, certain sort of data or just a belief system, but actually this pursuit. And the reason why also I think it's so relevant throughout ages is sometimes, of course, we become so, let's say, extrovert. We stop looking into ourselves deeply, and we always look and study outside, because that's very easy. You just basically look around and then think that, yes, that is the truth, that is the facts. But Buddha won't disagree to a certain extent. Of course, yes, what you see is there's a certain truth in that, what you see. There's a certain truth in what you actually hear. But the deeper level of truth is something different, because what you see is only the appearance. And the deeper level, that appearance may be fundamentally contradictory with how actually it exists. We all appear to be very solid. But the deeper level, we are just a bunch of atoms, or even molecular, subatomic level. There is no solidity whatsoever. So then, I think, so in that sense, you can see the Buddha's approach that Buddha wants us to use Now, for this one, you could really look at the Kalama Sutta, where Buddha says, okay, don't follow scriptures, don't follow traditions, don't follow me, don't believe me, don't follow your teacher just because he is a teacher, he says. And then Agbe says, okay, then how do you negotiate? How do you say something is right, correct action? How do you say something is incorrect action? You need to go deeply and investigate. And he says, then from your own investigation, you will come out the criteria of what is a good action and bad action. Because any thought that you have that actually makes you disturbed, angry, agitated, takes away your pleasure, takes away your equanimity, mental composure, ability to reason out. Those things, Buddha says, they are certainly unwholesome because they actually disturbs you. And so that finding is something, a discovery that one has to make. So yes, I think even that's why I think part of the Buddha's teaching and the reason why it can go hand in hand with the scientific investigation is because you can leave all these things aside, even the so-called rebirth. Because people think sometimes, of course, particularly traditional Buddhists think that believing rebirth is so important. Maybe, yeah, because if you believe in that rebirth and then you take seriously, but the problem is if you believe in rebirth and say, okay, I have to do these things, good things, because then in the future I'll get something. I shouldn't do bad things because in the future I will have to pay. But then that's actually not really a Buddhist path. It actually from thinking from egocentricity, because you always now your criteria of good or bad action is with reference to yourself. But Buddha is saying no, that can't be, because that's not Bodhisattva's path. Bodhisattva's path doesn't matter whose action or not. Something that causes suffering, that whether to you or others, that can be criteria for unwholesome action. So then, even looking at if you look at the Kalama Sutta, the Buddha says, leave aside so-called rebirth for time being. Rebirth, karma, just even if you really don't understand what karma is. Karma, of course, is the working mechanic of this mind and mental process, how they react and how they interact, and so sometimes can be complicated. But then the only way we can understand is actually through sitting and meditation and observing our own mind. Because when you observe your mind, you realize that if you're angry, what sort of state? What is happening with your bodily sensation? What sort of the circulation, the disturbance in the breathing system? Whereas if you're calm and quiet and very single-pointed, just completely without disturbing thought, is a totally different state of mind. So those things you cannot teach. There's no way that teacher can teach. That's what Buddha says. I can point you, but I cannot take you on, to the levels that you want to. You have to go to your, and walk yourself. So yeah, I think this method, even not only the discovery can be scientific, but also especially the path, the process that we can access from Buddhism. Well, of course, having said that, Buddhism is a big world. So many different paths, different traditions. So all traditions came up different practices, and all tradition has its own advantage, I think. Because even though, remember Tibetan tradition, tantric, deeply ritual, it has its own significance, if you really can appreciate it. But I think if you really want to walk, scientifically, and like His Holiness says, be 21st century Buddhist, then I think we have to be sort of ultra modern, if you like. And then basically, yes, I think those simple techniques matters most. Okay, so we sit for a little while and then resume the sutra. calmly, quietly, and very attentively focusing on your breath. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Develop distinct awareness of your breathing. Distinct awareness of your breathing. As it comes in, as it goes out. Distinctly. And as long as possible, sustaining the continuity of your awareness. Sustain the continuity of your awareness. Observe vigilantly. Minds become distracted. You have to bring back again and again, again and again. Again it wanders. Again you have to come back. Again it wanders. Again you have to come back. Very patiently. Very, very patiently. Persistently. develop single-pointed mind, very attentive mind. Attentively focus on your breathing as it comes in, it goes out. Okay, thank you. Right. Now the closing part of our Sutra study. I was not that impressed. So I shouldn't be saying that against sutras, right? uh, unfortunately, it's not a great deal of. Oh, 1 minute. I was trying to. It is. It doesn't seem to be a great deal of. Oh. What are you seeing? Okay, I think I'm sharing you the. Trying to share you. Oh. Okay. Can you see this, Lindy?
Yes, it's okay. It's just it needs to be a little bit bigger. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, full screen would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yep. So I didn't find actually there's not that much of I mean nothing very interesting in the few remaining chapters. So we can quickly have an overview of what's in there. Of course, one thing that we can talk about certainly first a quick, having a quick look at those chapters, that remaining chapters from 21 onward to 27, and then we will have a overall sort of brief discussion. I think what would, from my standpoint, what are the most interesting part of this sutra? Of course, this is very a popular sutra among, especially. I'm not too sure about the, among the Tibetan. Let's say if you think about the Tibetan scholars and Tibetan practitioners, I'm not sure how seriously they would take this. But on the other hand, as we discussed, much of the sutra actually lays the foundation of Tibetan tradition, because especially, of course, Ekayana, the notion that there is only one vehicle. But people, Tibetan tradition might not emphasize that so much. But then, of course, because of the fact that they are committed to Vajrayana tradition, which is the idea that Vajrayana is at the apex, of the climax of all these vehicles, then you could say, yeah, Tibetan actually take this sutras, underlying teaching of the sutra quite seriously. Then, of course, we notice there are so many beautiful parables that displays the skill, Buddha as a skillful teacher. Are you able to see me?
I can't see you, Sonam.
Yeah, I don't know what happened today. Strange thing. Usually I can see. Okay, let me check. Stop sharing. Okay, maybe I might have accidentally. Okay, there it is.
There you are. That's good. That's better.
The head.
Thank you.
Okay. So Taranis, remember Tarani is the Tibetan Wiki Sunga. It's a Tibetans love this, of course. Om Mani Padme Hum is a Tarani, and then Om Vajra Sattva Hum is Tarani. The Tibetans recite so many mantras, and basically mantras are supposed to be some sort of coded words that are blessed, but also they are very powerful. Supposedly, I don't have a direct experience of anything, so I can't tell you anything about Taranis. Of course, Tibetans do recite a lot of Taranis, mantras. For example, like Om Mani Padme Hum, Tibetans at the Tibetan government nowadays, exile administration, requests all the Tibetans to recite Om Mani Padme Hum mantra to for the long life of His Holiness. So apparently does something, but of course it would be very difficult to substantiate that claim, at least for me. So anyway, this chapter is all about Taranis and the benefit arising from it. So I think there is not much. Basically, Bodhisattva Vaishaj Raj asked Buddha how much merit someone who holds this sutra. Of course, at beginning, and then the sutra basically Buddha replies that so much of merit. In fact, sometimes you could sometimes almost unbelievable amount of merit that you can being accrued by just having the sutra or read even one part of the one line or two liner. And he says that somebody who's dedicated to a line verse from the sutra will have a great merit than that of making offerings to trillions of Buddhas. Imagine that. That's sometimes, yeah, I think this kind of maybe very hyperbolic description kind of makes it sometimes difficult to take this sutra seriously. Hopefully I'm not saying anything against sutra, but yes, I think hyperbolic language sometimes actually, let's put it this way, undercuts the significance of the message. Yeah, there might be, of course, merits accumulated, certainly. If you read sutra and if you understand it, that could actually, one line of Buddha's teaching could be all you need. That's possible. So it would be, in that sense, of course, it would be far better than offering quintillions of Buddha's offerings, right? But generally, if people understand it's one line, of course, we read how many lines? We read almost whole scriptures. I mean, if you have followed me, this is like on almost 1,000 some pages, at least if you look at the ebook. That's a lot, and we read a lot, and I don't know what impact it had for us reading to this. So anyway, these kind of questions, interesting questions. But the point is, yes, Vaishya Raja then also, he says, recites a dharani that will have protect the holders of the sutras from attacks, states that to attack such person is to attack the quintillions of Buddhas. So, which means if you know somebody who actually takes this seriously, take sutra seriously, don't attack this person. Because that would be equivalent of attacking quintillion of Buddha. And not only that, so like that, I think there are essentially a lot of dharanis. If you look at the Sanskrit, there are dharanis are usually these coded words or sutras. They are best, I think, left in Sanskrit without translating them to Tibetan. Because if you do Tibetan, translate into Tibetan or English, mostly it wouldn't make any sense. But at least if you leave them in the Sanskrit, the mysteries remain. So you might say, okay, there might be something in it. And that might actually invite you deeper investigation. And who knows, in the process of your deeper investigation, you might get the real message. But just like translating names, David, if you translate David in Tibetan, I don't know what that would mean. Sonam in Tibetan, Sonam, of course, very popular Tibetan. Tenzin, or let's say Tenzin. Tenzin is a very popular Tibetan. If you translate it in English and try to spell that out, the holder of Dharma, okay, that's a pretty long name already. The holder of Dharma. And what is Dharma then? Yeah. So there are certain things that is much better, even for the convention to leave them as they are. And one of it, which is Dharanis, they are mostly left aside. So then, even if you really wants to have a basic understanding of them, you need to have some sort of Sanskrit pronunciation. Okay. So anyway, at the end of Sutra, Buddha basically requests or asks people to preserve the Sutra and protect them. And you will see that Sutra, the whole book ends with the this commitment that the Sutra will be protected at any cost. In chapter 22, this basically question is being asked about past Vaishrajaya's life, because remember he's supposed to be a medicine Buddha, and Buddha basically gives us an account of his past life. The Buddha, Nakshatra Raja, asked the Buddha to relate what Bodhisattva Vaishraja has practiced in his past life, and the Buddha says that in distant past there was a Buddha named Chandra Surya Vimala Prabhasa. Prabhasa Siri, with a lifespan of many aeons, and he says that a student, here's a student, and he basically, that Buddha Chandra Surya taught the Lotus Sutra, because this is all about Lotus Sutra, and his student Bodhisattva Sattva Pariya, because a Priya Darshana practices this and attains Samadhi. And it goes on, and basically what this Bodhisattva does is basically this one, he spends 12 years eating aromatic resins, drinking perfume oils, and then set his body on fire as offering to the Buddha. Now this might bring certain things. How is it that offering of one's burned body? I remember now this can actually bring the vivid memory of immolations. Can they be taken as an offering? I think that how can they be taken as offering? Is it not actually a sacrifice? It's not a sacrifice, and it's not a violence. Yeah, I think it's a very sort of thin line. Because if you, let's say, it's Tibetans, I'm not undermining the deeper commitment that they have, but because this is such a radical step, wouldn't that actually infringe Buddha's remember the first precept of non-injury? That's the cardinal Buddhist precept. And injuring doesn't matter whether you cause injury towards your own body or cause injury towards others' body. Body is body. So if you injure your own body in the name of as an offering, does it really? How can it accrue merit? Why do Buddhas need that kind of an offering, or how does it benefit? So I think these are some interesting questions, and I really don't have a clear answer to this. But generally, I would say the intention would matter a lot, because if there's ulterior intention first, let's say, and then hatred. So in the case of the Tibetans, of course, the Tibetans have immolating. Yes, they know that Tibetan culture, Tibetan tradition, and the freedom to practice their own religion is at a difficult stage, and then they know that the only way they can voice that concern is to perhaps to offer their body. Now, and if that's the course, then of course the evolution is very strong. Evolution is pure. But sometimes you might have evolution of so much of hatred towards Chinese occupier, and then resentment, and but because you are helpless, you might do these things. Then again, the evolution is not so pure, so it might be a different practice. But in this case, of course, we're talking about bodhisattvas. So then, when they, because they are already attained samadhis, egolessness. So they won't have any hatred towards others. Nor will they have any attachment or egocentrism towards them. So then offering would be very pure. So maybe we are talking about that kind of thing. And he says, the light of the fire burns through many worlds. And here again, there's a problem. Many worlds shine to the worlds, and the Buddhas, they commend him for supreme offering. Maybe there's an extraordinary offering, right? He burns for 12 years. And then miracle is born with the power of his speech to the king. So anyway, that actually theme brings us, what is that kind of offering? How can that be differentiated with animal sacrifice? The Tibetan, one of the, remember when His Holiness came out from Tibet, and he realized that a lot of people living in the fringes of the Tibetan area, border area, like Nepalese, in Ladakis, Kinoris, these people follow Tibetan Buddhism in the past, large number of them. But then they also practice along with it their own indigenous animistic tradition, which means animal sacrifice. So they think that they practice animal sacrifice as if it is a Buddhist practice. And His Holiness, he says in one speech, he says he has been working hard to actually stop that from happening. And in Tibet, when I went in 2007, of course there was a Lhasa tribe close to Tibetan Lhasa, and they were butchering all the animals. My family did as well, I think. And then what they do is actually they compile, I would say, group all the fats, animal fats together, and make it a sort of bunch, and then offer it to the altar. And I was so perplexed, and I asked my brother, why is this? Why do you do this? And he said, this is offering, and everyone in the village does it. And I said, that actually goes against Buddha's teaching if you think that you're Buddhist. This is and literally like there's no difference from doing that with a offering blood, because many of the animist culture or even the Hindus do animal sacrifice, and they remember they would they cut the throat and then straight away offer the blood. And what's the difference from doing that blood offering with offering of animal fats? And plenty of animal fats is a big sort of chunk, and they group together. I mean, they're more like animal rannets. They put them together. So this, I think, has this problem of animal sacrifice. Usually, if you take tradition seriously, if you take 5 precepts seriously, there cannot be room for any Buddhist to be doing such a thing. But then, what about this, body? Bodhisattvas offering themselves, burning their own body. Is that acceptable to Buddhists? And Buddhists, of course, usually explain those things through the intention. So, but I think intention alone would not be sufficient to as a criteria for action, good action or bad action. Because then those poor people, butchers, or even animal, and people who do animal sacrifice, they do have pure intention. They think that this is the right way. This is the offering. They do have intention, good intention. So then, would that be actually acceptable? Wouldn't that undermine the validity of the first precept, which says I abstain from taking any lives of any breathing beings. That's the first precept. Remember, it's not, Buddha said, it doesn't say you shall or thou shall abstain taking lives of any breathing being. No, basically, when you become Buddhas, that's the precept you take. You take. I abstain from here on until I breathe my last. Abstain from taking lives of any breathing beings. That's the first precept. And then, of course, stealing and other follows. But then the first precept, and then there's a deeper message of the first precept, and that is total nonviolence, commitment to total nonviolence. Animal sacrifice, certainly, of course, definitely bridges that precept. But then, what about offering your body? Is this bodhisattva doing basically infringing the first precept? It looks that way, at least. But of course, this sutra does not see this, because then it says, look, they were celebrating, in fact, that. Okay. Right. So then he says that the Buddha tells him that he is passing into nirvana, and okay, so that's so important, I think. Yeah, so he says this Sarvasattva Priya Darshana was the previous life of Veshyaja, right? Veshyaja Raja. That's basically the question. Who is this guy? Who is Veshyaja? What was he doing in the practice? And the practice was for somehow practicing self-immolation. Maybe that's not the correct word. Offering one's body and burning it. That doesn't sound actually quite right. He then programmed how the offering of a body is the greatest way to create merit, and that the follower of a Mahayana should burn a toe, finger, and limb as offering to stupas. How does that fit with the whole Buddhist ethics? Yeah, I have a hard time swallowing this. Anyway, so that's why I think these suttas are certainly questionable. I think, and of course, there are many, even the traditional indigenous scholars who are actually now questioning very much about the veracity of so-called canon, Buddhist canons, whether they, there might be some, of course, sutras that actually can reflect Buddhist teaching well, but then this kind of sutta, some of them, of course, they are partly goes very well with the skillful teachings, perfect from Ekayana, the notion of that there is one vehicle, that's perfectly fine. But then also looking and literally like belittling the other vehicles, as if they are some sort of no good practice, or even totally wrong path, very sectarian. And I'm not sure actually that's the way you want to proceed as a Buddhist. Because those are the teachings Buddha taught, and most of his teachers, students are actually followers of what you call Shravakayana and Pratik Buddha. Okay, so there's a question for us, right? This notion of Mahayana. If you're a Mahayana follower, get ready. You can burn your toe, finger, limb, and offer the stupa. What does that mean? Yeah. Anyway, that's one question. In chapter 23, I think there is not much here again. I think there is very little about, basically it's all about a question of one bodhisattva, Gadga Swara. He wants to come to our world to see Buddha Shakyamuni. And there's and he makes intensive offerings, and he was able to finally able to come to this world to see Buddha Shakyamuni with it so much of a divine like manifestations and so forth. So I don't think there is anything philosophically interesting anyway. in chapter 24, Facing Everywhere, the teaching of the miracles of Avalokateshwara. This is actually matters, at least for the Tibetans as well as Southeast Asian Buddhists, because Avalokateshwara is a big deal. And now the question is, Akshamadi Bodhisattva asked Buddha what the name Avalokateshwara means. Remember, of course, Tibetan chanting 1,000 armed, 1,000 eyed. As usually the story is that he first made the commitment to become a bodhisattva, which means bodhisattva commitment is a commitment you make that, okay, I will not become fully enlightened until and unless all beings are fully enlightened before me. I mean, of course, there are bodhisattva commitment can be made different, and there are different types of commitment. One is when you make that pledge, then of course, and then you realize only one person is enough to annoy you. Now all of a sudden you have made all the pledge that you're going to work for the benefit of all sentient beings, and then your next neighbor is a very, very annoying person who irritates you so much. It doesn't have to be next to neighbor, or you could be your brother, your sister, or your, one of your siblings, who knows, could be so irritating. And he turns out, yeah, Avalokateshwara found something like something similar. And then he shook his head and budded and maybe split his head into pieces, and apparently turned into thousands splinters, and had hence, supposedly 1,000 legs and 1,000 eyed with 1,000 arms. Basically gave up. Oh no, it's impossible. If I cannot just if I cannot tolerate or one person being so irritable or annoying, how is it, how could I manage all those sentient beings? Anyway, there's this story, and I don't know exactly how truthful that story is, but yeah, this background story. So anyway, Buddha was asked, what does this Avalokateshwara means? And Buddha says, and recounting how hearing the name of Avalokateshwara, Buddha did not actually spell out what it means. Basically, Buddha said that Avalokateshwara is essentially the name itself is so significant, so powerful, and it has an enormous healing effect. Just hearing the name of Avalokateshvara and thinking of him or calling out to him will save beings from all kinds of dangers, such as fires, drowning, snakes, and violence. Now, so remember, Tibetans, before they take a journey, so I'm sure Australians, all the Tibetans, traditional Tibetans, when they left India and when they're about to take board on the train or flight, they will have recited Tara mantras. They might have recited, either, did some recitations, including doing the mantra of Tara, Tare tu tare turi soha, Tare tu tare turi soha, that type of mantras, or Om Mani Padme Hum, because Om Mani Padme Hum is usually the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra associated with Avalokateshvara. Avalokateshvara, or Tibetans consider His Holiness to be a manifestation of Avalokateshvara. So for his long life, we recite Om Mani Padme Hum, and they, I think some of them, I'm not one of those who, because I'm still kind of very skeptical with these kind of names anyway. So I tend not to do that, but there are people who actually do take this seriously. So they would recite a lot of mantras. But this sutra actually gives a justification, reasons why that can work. So let's say if you recite a lot of Avalokateshvara Om Mani Padme Hum mantras, yes, one thing is you could prevent fire dangers, drowning, snakes, and violence. Now, how is that possible? If you have to try to explain it with a certain logic or argument, I have no idea really. I have no idea how that works. if someone pays homage to Avalokateshwara, Buddha says, they will be free from desire, anger, and ignorance. That is, even to me, it contradicts everything that Buddhist practice tells us. Because if we just recite a name of a person, and if somehow liberates you from desire, anger, and ignorance, then why do you actually follow Buddha's path? Why is Buddha's path so distinct? Why does it Buddha say that you have to walk your path yourself? The only way to walk the path is Eightfold Path. And Eightfold Path is right speech, right action, right livelihood, right intention, right attention, all those skills that one has to develop. And for this, you just blindly follow somebody's name and then recite, and all of a sudden you become free from desire, anger, hatred. That's difficult, actually, and difficult to be compatible. So now, so then, is there any way I can explain what that means? Well, maybe this one, right? So one thing is, to me, it is, if you take this as freedom from desire, anger, and ignorance by just recalling somebody's name, then I think the distinct nature of Buddha's teaching is totally lost. This kind of thing was already there during the time of Buddha, because remember, Hindus love to call Ram, Ram. They do that. Every Ram is everywhere, So what's the difference? What's the difference between calling Avalokateshwara's name and Ram's name? If just, after all, it's just calling somebody's name, and then if you become liberated out of all of a sudden. So I think that makes, I would say, it makes no sense. But maybe there might be another way to make that sense. So let's say, okay, let's say that I'm reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. And when you do that, at that moment, when you're doing that, your mind can be calm. Your mind can be free from anger, free from ignorance. At that point, can't be entirely free from ignorance. There is no way. But at least at that state, you are not angry. At that state, you are not lustful. That actually explanation we can give. But if the sutra is claiming that just calling out Avalokateshwara's name and then you become free from these three poisons, then the whole, basically, then you have literally sutra contradicts the whole process, the path, a rigorous path, meditation and everything. So then why would you work hard and just basically recite mantras all the time, and that would be enough? Yeah, so I think there's a two-slide way of explaining that. Okay, well, woman who does so will have an excellent son. Okay, now if you're in all you need to do, if you want to have an excellent son, if you haven't had excellent son so far and you want excellent son, that's what you need to do. Recite Avalokateshwara's name. Sorry, I shouldn't be laughing. But in Southeast Asia, they actually take it seriously. People do take this seriously. Like if you are Hindu and if you are having trouble conceiving, they would go to Shiva's lingam and they would touch Shiva's lingam and pour him on the Shiva's lingam. Lingam, remember, is Shiva's genitalia, to put it bluntly. That's the Shiva's genitalia. And put milk and everything, do a lot of offerings, and supposedly they become pregnant. Mystery, there can't be a lot of mysteries. Of course, life is full of mysteries, and sometimes, you can't have a very clear-cut sort of philosophical discussion about that. So this might be another case. Maybe another possible reason is okay. So maybe this is the traditional explanation. Traditional explanation is because Avalokateshwara is so dedicated to the well-being of every sentient being, welfare of every sentient being. The name itself is a very profused with blessings. So if you actually are associated with the name, you get certain benefit. One of which is the effect of anger-free at that moment, desire-free at that moment. And then that vibration may help women. because physiological, so it has to have a physiological impact, not just psychological, physiological impact, that you become much receptive. Not only just son, you are going to receive a consider excellent son. Anyway, so that merit of paying homage to him is equal to paying homage to countless Buddhas. Again, here. Akshayamati asked the Buddha about the activity of Avalokateshwara, and Buddha says that he takes the form of various deities and humans, Buddhas, and bodhisattvas in various worlds. So this is basic Avalokateshwara. Not only that, there is a great merit to be gained from reciting his names, but also one of the reasons is the activity, the way Avalokateshwara perform his activities can be sometimes very multidimensional, because there is no one form he takes. He assumes so many different forms. Sometimes he comes as a deity, sometimes can become as a Mara, sometimes Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. Your own Kalyan Mitra, good friend, that actually triggers you to practice. Okay, so then of course Akshayamati offers a pearl necklace, which we can leave. Doesn't matter, pearl necklace. If you are interested in pearl necklace, you can have a close read of the sutra. And in chapter 25, the past of King Shubhya Yuha. Now, this is interesting. Well, I mean, not very well known, of course. I don't. This is the first time that I'm. This king apparently was not a Buddhist. Doesn't follow Buddhist teaching when he early on, and then he got two sons, Vimala Garbha and Vimala Netra. Now, both of them are very accomplished Buddhists, and of course they can also display a lot of miracles. And mother knew that, and mother was already drawn towards Buddha, but she was a little bit unsure about the father, because father's teacher is a Hindu. Usually if you're Hindu, usually you wouldn't follow Buddha, because their path is very different. Why? Because Buddha says your path is mostly introvert and nothing to do with rituals, almost all about walking, developing those skills. And the the two sons. So then these two sons approaches their mother and ask mother the permission to go to see the Buddha. And this mother says, no, but maybe you may have to convince your father to give the permission. I'm happy to do that, but your father may not, because he follow a different teacher. And then she basically advised them to show a miracle to the father, because father was not so convinced. So they basically displayed a big miracle, and father was so amazed, mesmerized. How did you actually learn all these things? Who's your teacher? That's what the question he put to his two of his sons. And then son said, yeah, our teacher is a Buddha. And then of course that's all he needs, display of merit and miracles. Now this actually raises interesting point as well. Now in this case, actually the king was drawn into Buddha because of his son's display of miracles. But in the actual life of Buddha Shakyamuni, if you have watched Buddha's life stories, a whole drama series made in India. If you haven't watch it, it's worth watching. I hope there are English subtitles. They might have English subtitles now. Might be Netflix. I don't know if there is one Netflix, or maybe some other. But it actually, in India, basically, it came as a TV program. Now, in that program, and just like the well-known account is that I lost thought. Sort of something came to my mind. Yes, in that TV series, what happens is two of his disciples actually were refused to give alms, and they said, "Okay, we will give you alms, but only if you have to display or miracles." And then what they did actually, they put their arms on a very high pole and just basically hoisted up way up there. They could not reach. So then two disciples basically showed the miracle, and they literally flew, and then obtained the arms. And then, of course, Buddha was reported of that event, and Buddha said, from that onward, Buddha said that you are not recommended to show miracles or display miracles for the benefit of your for your own benefit, because that's what it is at the moment, for the benefit, because they are worried that if they don't get alms, they won't have anything to give or offer to Buddha. So they displayed it, and Buddha said, doesn't matter. One day of no food is not going to, not going to impact, not going to kill us. So don't. And that's why Buddha banned his disciples from displaying miracles, right? But the cases, of course, that miracles are so important, because especially in this case, if his sons did not display miracles, the king would not be actually drawn to the king, drawn toward Buddha. And remember, the impact of one king being drawn to a good teacher is enormous. So then what happens is, because the king was so impressed by the miracle, and then when the king asked his sons who was his teacher, and they said, of course, it's Buddha, and then they flocked, all of them went to the Buddha and received the Buddha's teaching. And then what happened? As soon as they heard from Buddha, the king gave up his throne. He renounced the kingship, palace, and he actually he became a monk. And he says thousands, I suppose, maybe more than thousands. Okay, so what it says, the king gave up his throne to his younger brother, and he and all his others became a bhikshus and bhikkhunis, monks and nuns. And I mean, that kind of impact. So then you can, in this case, you can actually understand the importance of miracle. A king would not give up his, would not be drawn to the Buddha's teaching had he not been displayed, or had he not been impressed by the power of the display that was demonstrated by his own sons. And then, of course, the king says that his teachers were two of his sons. He used the word Kalya Mitra. If you look at the Sutra detail, you'll see Sutra king basically used Kalyan Mitra to describe his sons. He says, they are my teachers. They taught me how to actually follow Buddha. So yeah, I think this Sutra is interesting. And then Buddha, in the process, Buddha prophesied king's Buddhahood ultimately, after millions. And then here also Buddha says, Shakyamuni explains the Bodhisattva Padmashri. Padmashri was the king, and Bodhisattva Vairochana was the queen, and the Bodhisattva Vaishyajaraj are his two sons. He says the world will pay homage to anyone who knows the name of those two bodhisattvas. So if you look at Vimala Garbha and Vimala Netra, two of his sons, they were actually the names, and that literally inspired the king to become or to take to be drawn towards the Buddha. Okay, and then chapter 26, Samandarabhadra. Again, Samandarabhadra is a well-known character, bodhisattva character. Yeah, bodhisattva in the traditional milieu, at least in Tibet. Bodhisattva Samandarabhadra, with the countless bodhisattvas, came to the eastern world to the Buddha and request the teaching of this sutra. And the Buddha described the 4 qualities of women. I can't get the 4 qualities because I don't see. I'm just looking at. I don't remember exactly what those 4 qualities are there. But yes, 4 qualities. of the woman who will obtain the sutra. And then and basically what it does in this sutra, Buddha says, of course, it gives many other goods or qualities that will accrue by protecting and respecting the sutra. And now here, what Samandrapada does is Samandrapada promises Buddha that he will protect the sutra. He says, Samandrapada promises to protect those who uphold the sutra in the future from humans and non-humans. Now, Samandrapada, so that's why also one of the reasons why Tibetans or Buddhists actually recite the Samandrapadas and propitiate him to a certain extent is because of that kind of relation. Okay, now, and then there's another part. Of course, if there's so much good merit to be made by reciting and preserving the sutra, what will be the opposite? What will be the impact of those who disrespect and the sutra? Of course, he says, various kinds of physical ailments and deformities results from disrespect of the sutra. So the sutra way of studying is a serious one. So if you don't pay respect, that's what eventuates, at least. The chapter concludes by saying countless bodhisattvas attain the great power of mental attention through the listening this chapter. So that's chapter 26 and chapter 27. This is the interesting. They basically Buddha said, now remember, Dhamma cloud is such an important sutra, and of course now Buddha will be gone. Buddha is gone, and he says, who's going to maintain the continue to the teaching? And then of course says the Buddha miraculous takes the right hands of all the bodhisattvas in his right hand and entrusts the sutras to them. So all the bodhisattvas, they promised to make it widespread. The Buddha gave this leave to all the Buddha who had come from the others to depart. Buddha, Prabhu Ratna, and all others Buddhas, bodhisattvas, being rejoice and praise the Buddha's teaching. So that's what it does. In the end, ultimately, chapter 27 is all about entrusting Buddha. When Buddha passed away, of course, who's going to take after look after the sutra? And they basically said, yes, we all need to take that responsibility seriously. And there was a good conclusion after all, because what this does is all about essentially the Dhamma Sutra and the teaching and the periods of teaching. Actually, an interesting point that brings that sutra brings. Okay, so how are we doing time? Now this is officially sort of the end of sutra. So any questions so far? Before I just quick look at a quick, maybe a preview of more what I think is a most interesting part of the sutra, and we can actually look again, go back partly from that will be very sort of essentially like a browsing. So just quick recap of what the important aspect of the sutra. Any questions so far?
Could I just make a comment or two about the sacrificing and the burning of the toe, etc.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, my mother's generation had a saying: when somebody really, really wanted something, they used to say, "I'd give an arm or a leg for that." And I'm just wondering if there's some in the text, maybe not literally, but saying, to do the good thing, you would give an arm or a leg, sacrifice. And I mean, no, I never in my childhood ever met anyone who actually gave their arm or leg, but they were just in, conveying how strong they wanted to do this thing, or,
Mm-hmm.
And just the other thing I'd like to say, how much I have appreciated this sutra. So many amazing parables in here that I just find it fantastic. And there are too many for me to say about here, but 8 or 9 that just I jotted down that were just so clarifying.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Dharma. Yeah, fantastic parables. Thank you very much.
Do you want to quickly name those parables if you have jotted them? Yeah.
Well, the first one I jotted down was about the man who had many sons in the house, big house that was on fire, and they wouldn't come. He couldn't get them to come out, so he offered them some chariots, it said in the text, or I think you might have said toys. And to me, it came across that, we're in samsara, and sometimes we have to be lured out to the Dharma. And when they came out, he told them they have many, many chariots. When they came out, there was only one. But they were satisfied because there's only the one Dharma. Yeah, the one teachings of the Buddha. So you don't need many. Only the one is good enough. Another one was about the man whose son was wandering as a beggar. Yeah. And the rich man found the son and wanted to offer him his wealth, which I guess is the Dharma. And the son didn't feel worthy, and the father had to gradually encourage the son to finally accept what was available to him.
Wonderful.
It's probably enough now, or I've got more.
Yeah, go ahead. You can. I think this is a summary. So
willing?
let's put this there. This is the summary you're doing.
I don't want to hog the show.
No. Actually, this is good. I think.
Other one was just a descriptive one about the Dharma. It's like a huge cloud full of pure rain, which falls equally on all seeds. Some seeds grow better than others, but the rain is equally available, falling on all. And another one was the clay bowls. They're made all the same, but some people may choose to put pure offerings in the bowl, or another person may want to put some rubbish in there. And so showing our part in deciding what we do with the bowls, the Dharma. And the blind man who does not believe colors exist, but the doctor, who's the Buddha, I presume, gives him the medicine, cures the blindness. So then the man is arrogant and says, okay, I see so many colors, that's the only colors there are. But when he acquires wisdom, then he can see more colors. That could be all that I've actually written.
Good. Yeah, actually, that's that's the sort of these were the similars that I would actually want to bring out as a really way of summarizing. So yes, I think you did beautifully well. Thank you, Jill. Other points? Any? Yeah, so I think if you look at these similes, of course, these similes meant to convey the message, and the message is that there is only one Dharma in the end, Dharma that Buddha teaches. Ultimately, there are different ways Buddha taught, and some using different skills. So essentially, remember, the sutra is basically giving us the explanation that Buddha is a skillful teacher. He's not like a modern teacher like us, for example. When I myself, as supposed to be a modern educator, go to the university and all the students are there and give a lecture, I have no idea who is interested, who would benefit from my talk. Maybe there's some, or maybe not at all possible. Why? Because I don't have a capacity to know exactly what each students need. because I don't know their mind. I don't read them, their own mind. So there is no way for me, no way of knowing what is needed and what would be helpful. And Buddha is not interested in making the point. Buddha is interested in actually taking those students along with him so that they can progressively flower. But in order to do that, Buddha needs to tailor according to the students' taste, what they like and what they dislike. Eventually, liking and disliking, eventually, of course, will dissipate, because liking and disliking essentially is almost like manifestation of craving. But that's important in the beginning, because if you don't like, let's say if Buddha give you a teaching, and if you didn't like the way he teaches, you want to follow him. There's no way. But Buddha gives you a teaching, and then basically it just kind of you you like very much, even though the teaching could be shallow, but you start following, and then gradually, of course, Buddha will take you deeper in end. Initially, Buddha might say, okay, like, yeah, there is some solidity, some I, what you call aliyam vijnana, some consciousness, storehouse consciousness deep inside, even though he said that there is no self. But there's something in you that actually preserves your own identity, that can and that you can take as your own to your own nature and such thing. And then gradually Buddha take you to groundlessness and would say, now look, there is nothing. You are not there. Initially, Buddha said, oh yeah, you do exist. You have this and that. And then it gradually, first thing he would take away is the reality of external things. Yeah, if you look at outside, yes, in the beginning, everything looks so real, yes. And then they said, okay, now look very carefully, closely, and try to dissect. And then we'll say, okay, now you don't see that. The solidity is not there. But then, and he would say, emphasize, oh yeah, of course, this external reality may not be there, but the internal reality is so-called mind. There is a real mind, your mind. That's there. That's good enough. So you can basically at least rest using that as your resting place. And then Buddha takes you to further one step, and then says, oh, even that called mind, your mind, is no longer there. Because look, your mind, analyze again and again, you'll find out that actually this your so-called real mind is just like any other thing. Just the moment you analyze it, it dissipates. Its substance dissipates, and therefore gradually taking into the doctrine of emptiness. So that's the trajectory that we are talking about. So that's why those metaphors are required in order for us to for the Buddha to skillfully guide us towards that ultimate aim. Ultimate aim is there's a single dharma, and single dharma, to put in a more philosophical term, is emptiness, the doctrine of emptiness. There is one and universal emptiness all the way, right? External, internal, that's emptiness through and through. And that emptiness is so fundamental for us to appreciate the deeper teaching of Buddha. Now, and then put it, of course, differently. In the Sutra language is ekayana. There is only one vehicle. That vehicle that actually gives the final teaching of the Buddha, the teaching of emptiness, that's encoded in the word ekayana, even though text does not say explicitly. That's, I think, Jill, the metaphors that you brought, actually, yeah, they beautifully encapsulate that area. Okay, so this actually, you'll notice, 1 minute, where am I? Yes, please.
I have a question. It's just it just sort of popped in my head, actually. If the main goal is emptiness, that sort of appreciation, I suppose, understanding, you call it the doctrine, perhaps, it just sort of occurred to me, couldn't you make that be a little bit, I don't know how to put it exactly, but I have in my mind this concept of being like pretty, I think it's nihilism and pessimistic.
Yeah.
And like those sort of connotations is quite negative. How could you sort of look at this doctrine of emptiness in a sort of a very a safe way, so you don't sort of succumb to those sort of assumptions about what it could mean?
Yeah, that's a very wonderful question. Because yes, usually emptiness, if you teach emptiness to a student who's not prepared, who is not well prepared, mature, yes, either you most likely is that this person's students will trap in the what we call the trap of nihilism. They'll say, okay, this guy's actually denying everything. How can that be? I exist, everything exists. To me, everything exists. That's a reification. But then Buddhist teaching is all about nihilism because it denies the existence of everything. For this reason, precisely those metaphors, similes, Buddha used skills to gradually bring his student to maturity, so that eventually, when they're perfectly safe at a container and they're perfectly developed psychologically, then they basically, Buddha literally take away the rug beneath them. That now you are not standing on any ground. You are groundless. Your existence is groundless, and there is no ground on which you stand. This is emptiness. Now, of course, because they are very developed, very mature, and very developed, no longer attachment or egocentricity, very thin, then of course they can perfectly now appreciate, because what happens is the slight attachment towards them, the moment they reveal that you are groundless and you are not standing on any ground anymore, that basically understanding will take away slight attachment towards themselves and towards everything else. So that's why, remember these metaphors of the skillful, why Buddha was skillful, because gradually Buddha takes that. So as you said, yeah, there is a two extreme. One is extreme reification. Reification is to see everything as a real. I'm a real, you are real, this computer is a real, the latest that you see around us is real. Everything, communication is real. That seems to be how the world is. And that's the starting point. Buddha initially, of course, would say, okay, yeah, these are real. To a certain extent, they're real because, they function. You get hungry, we need water because we thirsty. So there's a hunger. You can't deny hunger. There's the thirst. You can't deny thirst. So all these things exist, but how do they exist? That's the question. And then, of course, remember those Buddhist teaching gradually takes one to deeper understanding that, of course, there is no foundation, there is no you. If there is no you, then who is the one that is hungry? If there is no you, then who is the one who is thirsty? Because what we are doing initially is we're attributing hunger and thirst to one agent. Now Buddha was saying, deep down, there is no agency. There is a multiple, what do you call it, relations. Everything is interrelated, but no one thing that is you. Anyway, so that's why I think once when the students are safe and their understanding level is very mature, then at that point, Buddha reveals the secret, and the secret is groundlessness. This groundlessness is what we call emptiness. Okay, that's one point. Thanks, Tenzila. That's a wonderful question, because usually, of course, even in the traditional Buddhist teaching, we hear saying such as this. Some Hindus initially, when they come across Buddhist teaching, the skull, literally they feel as if their skull is cracking, because so far, let's say you have been meditating on your soul for millions of years, 1,000 years, or maybe not only that, maybe more than that. If you believe that there is an eternal soul and you have been meditating that solid identity for millions and millions of lives, and then all of a sudden your teacher is saying, no, you don't exist. Wow, that's just like a bombshell. Literally, that bombshell, that splinters your head, 1,000 into 1,000 pieces. And some actually meditators do experience something like that. I do remember, if I stop sharing this, I do remember actually some of our meditators, even the Vipassana meditators, philosopher, one philosophy student, a colleague of mine, who set for her first 10-day retreat, and she apparently was a very sort of mature and very concentrated and a very intense experience. She literally felt as if everything is melting, everything is dissolving. This is exactly what you call impermanence. Impermanence is essential dissolution and rising, these two. A rising, dissolution, and she actually experienced vivid clarity of impermanence. And she was so scared. She was so fearful, scared. The reason is because she was not mature enough. At least there is no, what do you call it, safe container, safety net that brought her maturity. If she was told, okay, gradually, if you meditate, gradually those things, experiences will come about, and you need to be ready. Then she would be ready, even though she did a little bit of Buddhist philosophy, but she was not ready, mature enough to understand that. And then she found it very, very scary, because everything into her through experience found it totally dissolving. And this is what happens. I was telling you also that if you are meditating, if you're like a serious deep meditator, at a certain point you feel as if the whole of your existence is like just the movement of the road. When you look at the car, and when your car is moving, let's say 120 kilometers per hour, if you look at the front road, and you'll see how far it is moving. So, the whole thing is moving, and you will notice actually your existence is exactly like that. And that can be very scary, because now there is no identity. Everything is literally melting away. So it is for those reasons, actually, yeah, the skillful teaching is very required. But modern teachers or practitioners, non-practitioners, would have no idea where the students stand. And if we have, that's why we just teach one thing, anything that comes across mind, and most of the time it doesn't help the students, it doesn't help them to mature. So that's why I was contrasting between so-called modern academic teachers. Sometimes people think academics are much, better conditioned in teaching because supposedly objective. But is this objectivity staying aloof? I have no internal access to what is happening in the mind. So if I have no clue, if I've never traveled myself, how can I actually lead somebody else on that road? So yes, I think Buddhist practitioners have a much harder job, and teachers have a very difficult job to leading the students. So the only way good teachers can lead is the teacher has to be a rigorous meditator. Because after all, without that, student can meet bumps, and sometimes cracks, and sometimes can go deep. And the students, the teacher has to have a skill to take them up and then inspire them. So you might have sometimes meet bumps, what our teachers call storm. You will meet storms, a lot of storms. Those storms are so crucial because these are the stages. Initially, smaller storms, you feel as if the whole world is collapsing. And then you might feel as if you're running away because everything's so scary. You feel like you're running away. And the teacher's job is actually to bring you to some equilibrium. And then again, you move and meditate. Again, you say you have a deep, almost like feeling of nihilism, as if you don't exist. Everything is totally sort of melt away. It's so scary. And you feel as if, no, this is not the time. I'll stop here and then run away. Even my own experience, several cases. If I do 30 to 20 days, so deep, when you go so deep, that's what happens. The experience becomes so radical. And then when you go to teacher, because teachers are meditators, they know they have been there, and they know how to come out. That's why I think the teachers, one of the beauty of the sutra is these skillful techniques are brought up in a beautiful way, and those metaphors. Remember the island, and the burning house, dungeon house, how to bring those, coaxing them, and those, I think, the beautiful method. And the other, I think, the theme that we forgot to mention is about Buddhist egalitarianism. I would say, or it's almost like gender equality. When it comes to a soteriological goal of the Buddhism, ultimate goal of Buddhism is to actually to freedom. Gender is irrelevant. That's a very important point. Gender makes no difference, because that's why I think if you look at the some of the chapters, you'll notice that Buddha declares all his female students, Gautami, starting from Gautami, and declares the full awakening of all those teachers. And then there were also a nun, remember, a Naga daughter who basically comes out and displays her enlightenment, even though in spite of being having in a female body. So that's, I think, another more sort of contemporarily relevant topic that is quite useful. That talks about gender equality, and that, of course, there are certain ways in which you can talk about that. And sometimes this sutra at least tells us that the Naga daughter manifests herself, and basically eventually she turns into a male body and then become Buddha. It looks like as if that eventually you have to have a sort of a literal like male body to become Buddha. But then there are the other sutras basically that circumvent that requirement. And then, of course, Buddhist prophecy of all the all female sangha members to becoming full and Buddha at a certain point. I think that's another important a theme in this case. Prophecies of Shravakas, prophecy of all the major disciples of the Buddha, both Shravakas and Pratibuddhas. Okay, so any points that you want to make? Any questions?
At the risk of overdoing it, me again.
Yes, please. What?
In chapter 7, another parable I see I've written down about is on the way to enlightenment.
Yeah.
This is about travelers traveling with a skillful guide who lets the travelers rest in a beautiful imaginary city.
Yeah.
And after they rest, then they are ready to progress a bit further. Yeah. In their travel. Yeah,
I think that's certainly one of the beautiful parables that also shows the skills that teachers required. I mean, mature teachers, especially, we are taking Buddhist teaching as a practice oriented rather than theoretical oriented. Then the teachers have to have that kind of skills. Because, I mean, if you see maybe one of the pitfall or one of the downside of bodhisattvahood or Mahayana practices, supposedly takes 3 hours, minimum 3 hours. Except you take Vajrayana path, then Vajrayana path supposedly give you enlightenment within one lifetime. But that's if you take that bodhisattvahood is a 3-on business, that can actually break people's sort of enthusiasm. Oh, 3-on, wow, there's no way. And then if you move a little bit and still 3-ons is still there. And then, of course, if you have a very good teacher, basically a very mature teacher who had those kind of skills, all of a sudden you brought travel with, and then all of a sudden you have beautiful island, very good weather, nice beaches, and free time. Once you gain your energy back, and then basically make island to disappear. This is what happens in this parable, right? The guide has to help, and then Then he says, okay, now the nearest the nearest island is the last destination, and 1,000 miles away. And because there is no island, there is no stopover, you have to walk. That's the only way that you can stop. That's the last cart. Remember the last and bullock cart. That's the not the deer cart, reindeer cart, or that promises in the in these what is it, dilapidated building, the old building that is about to collapse, and then of course the teacher promising 3 beautiful toys, and the metaphor Jill brought out. So these are, I think, if you just read these things together, then the central message in this sutra is, yes, ultimately the teaching of Buddha goal is that the only way you can get to the ultimate goal of Buddhahood is that you have to understand emptiness. Let's say, now, why is this understanding emptiness, and why is this long and treacherous road? Is because it can be so scary. Impermanence itself is scary. And that's why those examples that I gave you of my colleague, myself, when you're actually deep in the end, these are very scary experiences. Very, very scary. And because why are they scary? Because we are so attached to the fixed notion of I and me. And when that is challenged by the direct experience of total impermanence, it's very scary. So then, of course, you need a respite, and the teachers can give you respite, and only with the respites are those like the shelters, small shelters that teachers build you, and they'll say, okay, now at this point, don't stop this meditation. For a certain point, focus on these things. So the teacher will say, instead of focusing here, focus on your sensation on these palms. Our teachers sometimes say this, because these palm, the sensation here is interesting, because when you focus on the bodily sensation, they can be sometimes you can get involved very psychologically. The psychological sensation and the so-called physiological sensation can be bound together. But these things you can still observe sensation, and your mind can stay very objective. So when you're petrified by certain meditative experiences, then teacher will say, okay, now come out and don't stop this for time being. Do anapana just to recuperate your mental stability, and then meditate or feel the sensations in your palms. That kind of technique, I think, so useful as literally give you a sigh of relief. So I think, yeah. So in that sense, I think these skillful teachings is fundamentally required, because the path can be very, very rocky and can be very challenging, partly because of our own attachment to fixed identity, notion of identity. And Buddha teachings basically says, not only that there is no fixed identity, there is no identity at all, because everything is disparate, everything is scattered, literally like the whole universe is just like the air with no solidity whatsoever. We only see the solidity only because we are looking from the surface. If you have a very high-powered microscope and look, everything is atomic, atoms, or even break the atoms, no solidity whatsoever. Everything is like a. So that's why emptiness is not vacuum. Emptiness is not nothing. Emptiness basically means everything can be broken down so minutely, so tiny bit, that they can be literally isolated, and that's how things are, and that fundamentally act as an antidote against our deepest intuition or clinging to us on self. And that's why it becomes a sort of a treacherous road, requiring so many different types of skills. Otherwise, if it is just like ordinary path, you really don't need much. I mean, certain posts, certain sort of signposting, but nothing deep.
Sonla,
Yes, please.
So I've just got one more question. If you full emptiness, if you just said like this notion of emptiness, really, at least from the Buddhist sort of side of things, it isn't strictly emptiness as such. It's just the idea there's nothing like these composite objects, shall we say. They're not solely like their own sort of being. They're still comprised of other stuff. I'm just curious whether there might be a better way then to sort of express that concept, that idea, rather than using the word of emptiness, because, well, in everyday usage, or just the semantic of the word suggests there is strictly nothing, yet you're saying that there are interdependent things. So from my understanding, there seems to be a bit of being a bit pedantic, perhaps. I would call it a semantic contradiction. I'm just wondering if there's a better way to sort of express that idea than using this word of emptiness.
I think definitely, I think that's the problem that this word brings. The word emptiness, Sanskrit word is shunya and shunyata. Shunyata becomes abstract. I think that's a problem. Shunya, if you say empty, then again you must say, okay, it is empty glass. We're talking about, we are so used to understand empty glass. You might think there is nothing, but actually it is the full glass. Buddhist notion of emptiness. Empty is when the glass is full, that glass is empty. The Buddhist notion of emptiness only applies when the glass is full. The glass has to be full, right? And because it is the full glass that you can, no, not this glass, sorry. It's a cup. Anyway, full cup, cup, you can say, oh, now this is interdependent, and it is empty. But it is, if it is empty, there's nothing. That's not the notion of emptiness, the doctrinal notion of emptiness Buddhist talks about. So yes, it certainly creates this tension, because there is a tension between. One thing is this, right? If you express positively, everything is relational or dependent. Technical term is dependent origination, pratitya samutpath, something that rises depending on matrix of causes and conditions. That's what's ultimate truth. So there are two ways of expressing. One is in the positive term. If you express in positive term, you could say everything is dependently originated. That's the emphasis, the emphasis or the language of Theravadas. In Theravada, everything is pratitya samutpath. If you understand pratitya samutpath, you understand Buddha's teaching and you become liberated arahant. In Mahayana tradition, emptiness. It is the emptiness, the notion of it as emptiness. Now, it could. The question is, can they be compatible? Absolutely yes. And in order to, I mean, the difficulty is the compatibility and the marriage of these two concepts. If you see that if you see the compatibility of these two concepts, not only its compatibility, but also literally like two counterparts.
Fusion.
Yeah, go on.
Fusion.
Yeah, fusion, or maybe fusion, because they don't contradict each other. That exactly basically means one and the same. It's just like two faces of the same coin. Yep, you're looking at the same coin, but exactly has two faces. One you see things, one you don't see things. And when you don't see things, you get petrified. Because you think, oh no, I don't exist. And that's why I think that's why teacher has to be skillful, because otherwise you become nihilistic. The moment you realize that you don't exist, or then you will say, oh, who am I? What happened to me? I thought I exist. But the other side of the coin says, no, you do exist. You don't exist as a substantive, sort of having core central entity, but you do exist as a relation property. So I think the way to do it is to put those two things is to let's say two faces of the same coin. Also, like in Jugend's word, fusion. Now you might say, why is this word empty or quiet? And of course, I think it does have a problem limitation, because let's tend to people who are not well familiar with the Buddhist doctrine of impermanence, selflessness. They think that, oh yeah, they're talking about something. They're denying existence there. But actually, they are not denying existence. Buddha never denied existence. Buddha is not nihilist. What Buddha is saying is that actually is the whole universe, the structure of the reality is not as they appear to us. The structure of reality is so interconnected. That's what it is. That interconnectivity basically says that there's no substance whatsoever that makes, and so it is empty of substance. So maybe you can say, when we talk about emptiness, you could ask what? Empty what? You ask this question, empty what? And then the reply is empty of essences, empty of substances. Then you actually accept a particular existence, but you deny the substance of the essences. And then I think it is easier to see it together. I think the best way to bring this together is to, of course, phenomenological experience of understanding impermanence. If you understand impermanence experientially, you start to look deeply within your own experience. You know that you exist. You are meditating. You can't deny that you don't exist. You're meditating. Just open your eyes, you will see yourself. Only when you meditate deeply, then you feel as if you don't exist. So I think the most efficient way of correcting this problem is through meditation, because there is no pure philosophical way to resolving the tension. Because in the end, you have to be literally convinced by your own experience, your existence without any essences. You do exist as purely interrelated being without any essence whatsoever. That's the correct, I think I would say, the correct understanding of both Pratitya Samutpada as well as Shunya concept. Okay, so that took us a little bit away from the sutra, but I think you have
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sonam, for everything, and especially the last tip about the concentration on the palms to give me a new, more direct grounding, especially in regard to the last chapter that broke a little my enthusiasm of understanding everything that far by seeing a lot of potholes in the highway. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. I think good point you brought. We are studying the sutras, right, as a sometimes source of inspiration. So, and we can disagree, and we have to disagree at a certain point, some point. But those things that we can just leave them aside for a time being. What is meaningful, you can take them, and that's exactly what Buddha suggests. To Kalamas, he says, leave aside karma, leave aside rebirth. If you don't believe that, doesn't matter for a time being. Give importance to your own practice now, and then at a certain point, you will develop your own faculty to see what your own future, your own past, your own history. Then it becomes undeniable when it becomes your own vision. Then you won't have a trouble. Before that, Buddha says, just focus on the present. Present meditation is important because that brings concrete transformation. It is this concrete transformation that allows us to see deeply our own, what you call subconscious, and with what is in their subconsciousness that came from our past history. The contents of our subconsciousness, everything that we have experienced is stored from the past experience, and we start looking deeply and basically revealing. Then, of course, those things are very revealing, and that in that process, our past becomes evident from one's own meditative experience. And not only that, when those dust or start coming out, I think our future path becomes clearer. So our mind becomes clearer. So then, of course, from one's own experience, so-called rebirth. I mean, rebirth is a problem, in fact. Birth, series of continued existence. Rebirth is a problem because nothing is reborn, technically. The reason nothing can be reborn is nothing can be repeated. Everything is impermanent. Everything has only momentary existence. So if everything is a momentary existence, nothing can be reborn, technically, right? So I think in this sense, I mean, if you look all the Mahayana sutras like this, so so far we read this one, and also plain 4, again, extravagant, very hyperbolic language. Much thing can be chopped away. If you are editor, modern editor, you would say, oh, all these things just leave aside. So 50% or maybe 70% of this sutra will go away if there's a very strict editor who is going to edit these sutra, because their language is so hyperbolic, and it sometimes doesn't do anything good, but that's the style. So therefore we don't take them as actually, I mean, the traditions do take them as Buddhist teachings. You could say the heart, the central message there are, of course, is enunciation or let's say elaboration of Buddhist teachings, but much of which actually, sometimes I think you could say very cultural accretions, sometimes partisanship, sometimes sectarianism, all things get into it, and that's what we are getting. So sometimes there, I think, you can see those potholes. There are inconsistencies all around. But then again, those inconsistencies sometimes that we see, looking from a different angle, may not be inconsistencies, because something that doesn't is not true for me could be sort of at a certain point, at a certain level of experience, may be true at that point. So that's why I think the skill is required, because there's no smooth paved way. It is zigzag all over. Sometimes with a deep precipice and deep holes and potholes, and those potholes I think are there in a certain sense for the reason, because our existence itself is not like a modern clear-cut, cutthroat sort of editor who wants everything to smooth and one type of language throughout from the beginning to the end. Just like when you write essay, consistency, coherency, and all these things, that's not life, and certainly not the reality. Our life, human, our existence seems to be so complex, so complex, and it is this in a certain sense, the complexity of our life that the sutra actually reveals itself. So it's rich. Sometimes some of them are very troubling, the later ones, because if you look at try to see Buddha's teaching on having a sort of consistent message, then actually the sutra challenges you. What do you mean by offering the whole body, cutting your limbs, offering to the Buddhas, would make a lot of merit? That just out there. How do you take meaning out of them? I think, and if there is a way you can think about it, that's okay. If not, just leave them. But many academics, modern academics, would actually take those portions and say, look, Buddhism is non-violence. Look, Buddhism has been violent all along. Look, this violence, in fact, you just self-immolate and offering to Buddha, that's acceptable. So it's literally chopping of somebody's limbs and legs. What's the difference between chopping your limbs and legs and chopping somebody else and offering to the Buddha? There is non-violence. I mean, they are actually. If you look at the some of the modern academics writing on Buddhism and what is it called? Buddhism and justified war. There are people who have done those. So that's actually maybe taking bits and pieces. So I think that challenge that Yugen raised is always there. Okay, so any questions? Any last questions? All right. So if there is no what next year? Lindy, you have any thoughts of next year? What are we doing?
Well,
Are
just
we doing anything?
I hope so. I really, really hope so, Sonam. No? But just before we continue to think a little bit about next year, I'd really love to, offer our heartfelt thanks for this year, and just this journey that through this sutra this year, and just thank you so much for leading us in this. Just to reinforce the very important, the very significance and importance of our consistent practice, our consistent, stretching our minds in every which way to bring it into our own experience where it's of benefit, as we continue. And also, I think this sutra and your wonderful, leading us through it really gave us a great feeling of that it is it's not an overnight. What we're doing is not an overnight fix. Really reinforce that even more. We might know that in words, of course, but it just gets deeper and deeper. And so we just thank you so very much for your perseverance with us and for joining us every month, and also giving us that opportunity to have the discipline to do our own, practice in between for each month to be meaningful if we want it to be that way. So that's another way for us to learn with our own practice, that it's not just something we're listening to, but actually requires us so much more, which is sometimes a new concept to the way we learn things, So I really appreciate, thank you so much for offering that to Chagdon Chentong and for those that are interested to join. And I do hope that next year you might join us again. I would very much offer our greater request for you to, if you have time, to join us next year along the same lines. But if I would like to ask you, Sonam, if you have some thoughts before I say something, before I have a thought about if next year is possible for you to join us. What would you like to do with us?
Yeah, I mean, if it depends, of course. If there's an interest. With a great pleasure, I found out actually that 84,000 has translated the Mindfulness Sutra. It's called Shali Smriti Upastan Sutra. It's again a huge sutra. In fact, maybe bigger than what sutra that we read. Okay.
Wow.
It's about mindfulness. It's called. In fact, it's the biggest single sutra existing in Tibetan canon. I think that's what it stated. So maybe I was thinking, okay, because we are, I'm not interested in meditation, but actually I do think that the only way for us to really to get the benefit from Buddha's teaching for own welfare is actually to do the practice. And of course, this theory can help practice, so that people don't get big surprise when they sort of all of a sudden found themselves in deep trench. Those one of those potholes. If you got into potholes, you know that you can come out. That and that's why theory basically are like the foundational conceptual understanding of various teachings. So that's important because then it actually supports the practice. So this sutra, let me actually quickly, for those of you, if you have never tried 84,000, I recommend you to have a quick look and you will be surprised. Okay, so let me quickly share this.
So this sounds very wonderful. I also think it's amazing that we've got the 84,000 as an app we can have on the phone also at any time to access any readings. It's just
that's it. Wonderful. So they made this actually now. You can download the app. Now, if I say just search mindfulness, that should bring the sutra up here. Could be it. Application mindfulness, yes, and it's usually Sat Dharma Smriti Upasthana. Tibetan word is Tambechu Tempa Nyabashakwa. Now this has a very direct equivalent Because remember, those of us Vipassana meditators, because Pali has two sutras. They both called Satipatthana Sutta. Exactly the same thing. Sanskrit is Smriti Upasthana Sutra, right? In Pali, it is called Satipatthana Sutta. Smriti is the equivalent for Pali Sati. Upasthana is the Pali equivalent of Satipatthana. Patthana means to establish. So, and this sutra, I thought, it's not actually, they haven't laid out with a good introduction, I don't think, just as what we noticed in the Thamma cloud, unless they have changed it, because they really don't have a very good summary. Okay, this is it. Oh, they might have an introduction. Okay, how does the introduction look like? So I was thinking maybe, okay, if you're interested, why not? Oh, there is something, but nothing detailed. No, this is the outline of text, which is helpful. So you can see here how long it is. And roughly. So I was thinking, because it's relevant to our practice. And now if you look, one of the good thing about going into the website is, you will notice that each word, actually, there's a word, technical word, Rajgrah. If you are not sure, you'll notice that you can click here and then it'll bring the meaning here. Yabukap in Tibetan, the ancient capital of Magadha. But in the app, it doesn't appear like that. If you download the document, it doesn't have that access. Again, alms, if you are not sure about what alms is, if you click it, you say Sonam, which is begging, right? Beggars, of course, begging, monks begging food. And that's why I think a good thing to actually have that site very easily accessible. And that site is basically 84,000.
Yeah.
It is called 84,000 translating the words of Buddha. Now,
Sonam, I think that sounds very, very, very wonderful. It looks like it might take more than 1 year, but we couldn't stop.
Yeah,
But
and I'm hoping, of course, there are a lot of other things too. It's again, description of different devas, so many different devas again. We're talking about a lot of devas, different heavens, and what they do and stuff there. It's not just purely meditation. So you will have some interesting encounters and maybe potholes too, or the challenges or difficulties. But I thought that might be actually a good candidate because what we do, and after all, this is mindfulness is the practice, isn't it?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you,
The
Sonam.
buzzword.
We would be very, very appreciative if that was something that we could include in our program next year with you. We would appreciate that very much.
So yeah, so I think tentatively we could say, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say tentatively, just say that that's what the sutra we are going to study. So if you are interested in explore mindfulness in detail, in meanwhile, okay, if you don't have time to read this, I recommend you to go through it. It won't take more than 2 months, I'm sure. If you read one chapter a week,
yeah,
it's quite a long one, right? But I think they have broken it quite nicely. So it should be manageable. And then along with this, read Pali's Satipatthana Sutta, right? Pali, now those of you are Vipassana student, our technique is based on Satipatthana Sutta. Teacher teaches, Goenka teaches the technique, but actually foundation of this technique comes from Satipatthana Sutta, and there are one longer one and a shorter one. Satipatthana Sutta is Goenkaji's own explanation, detailed explanation, exposition on the sutta, Satipatthana Sutta. And then if you have this, you'll see what are different objects of meditation. and breaking meditation into 4 sections: the mindfulness of mind, mindfulness of thoughts, mental content, mindfulness of body, and mindfulness of experience, or mindfulness of sensation. So those things, I think, if you get to read, so before reading this Mahayana Sutra, just because that's, Satipatthana Sutta is much more manageable, just read that and look at Goenkaji's explanation. So then I think that should help us also to situate and the different differences, understand the differences between these two suttas.
Sonam, thank you very much.
All right, so let's do a brief dedication and then we can stop. Make sure that you feel at ease within yourself. Quiet, comfortable, peaceful, and at ease within. And if possible, joyful. Appreciating your own time, your own existence. Feeling good of yourself, good about yourself within. You feel positive, optimistic, and then you can visualize all your loved ones sitting next to you or around you. From the depth of your heart, share your love. Share your concern, care. Send the vibration of your love. May they be happy. May she be happy. May he be happy. May they flourish in their life, accomplish their goals. May they find life fulfilling, enriching, rewarding. May they find their path of self-discovery. Self-discovery to the ultimate fulfillment, ultimate self-reliance. May they find themselves. May they become island unto themselves, night unto themselves. Likewise, spread the vibrational love throughout your neighbors, strangers, person whom you have a cross relationship, argument, some discord or disagreement. Make them come right in front of you, just sitting next to you, facing each other, face to face. Develop the strength to share your love. Letting go of any bitterness, tension, anger, animosity. Looking at his face, looking at her face. With genuine concern, genuine affection. Forgiving all the nasties the person has committed. Just forgive the person. Asking forgiveness for anything, any wrongdoing, wrongs that you have done intentionally and unintentionally. That could have hurt someone. Deep apology. In this way, seeing everyone equally, with eye of affection, with no biases, no prejudice, no preferences. May all beings be free from suffering. May they not suffer starvation from war, famine, calamities. May they find peace, happiness, and may they be able to find the path, the technique which can make them stronger, self-reliant, more compassionate. For their own good and for the good of others. And then make your own commitment. May I be able to work hard, using all the faculties at my disposal, the strength, to make myself free. Complete freedom from my anger, my hatred, aversion, attachment. Let me be strong, resolute, in order to achieve the ultimate peace, ultimate meaning. And may I be able to facilitate others in the best possible way. So others and all beings can attain the ultimate goal. Liberation from suffering, freedom from suffering. For the peace and happiness of many. Ultimate beatitude of the many. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonam. Thank you very much for the whole year, for today. And we wish you you have a wonderful break and a retreat for your annual retreat and everything else in between. And we look forward to being in touch to prepare for next year's program. So
Thank you very much. Yes. So everyone, all of you also,
mm.
enjoy festive season,
Mhm.
Merry Christmas, and along with a Happy New Year. Maybe a little too early, but yeah. So hopefully we have a good summer. But
I'm sure.
Thank you, Sonam, and thank you, Lindy, for organising with Sonam to offer this to us all for such a long time. Thank you very much.
okay.
Thank you, Sonam, for the year's teachings, and thank you, Lindy, and we'll see you next year.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Lindy. Of course, without you, nothing can happen. So
I don't know about that, but
organizing, yeah.
collectively, I'm just so pleased people come and we join
Yeah.
together in this way. So
Good.
thank you. Everybody's participation is very deeply appreciated. Yeah. So All the best to everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.